Hello and welcome everyone in today's Nanga Systems webinar on the topic of requirements management in Codebeamer. My name is László Katona. I'm today's presenter. I'm a senior consultant at Nanga Systems with a background of Codebeamer consulting. Today's agenda is going to look like this. We are going to start with an introduction to requirements management, followed by a Codebeamer overview. Then we will take a look into use cases and scenarios, best practices. We will then continue with an interactive demo in Codebeamer, and we will close today's webinar with a Q&A session. So let's dive into the requirements management overview. The importance of requirements management. Requirements management is a critical process in software development that ensures all project requirements are identified, documented, and tracked throughout the project lifecycle. This process is vital because we need to ensure that the final product meets the stakeholder needs and expectations, and effective requirements management can also help us to minimize the risk of project failure due to misunderstood or overlooked requirements, which at the end of the day will have a large impact on the overall budget and the cost, of course. There are 5 points that we need to take into account when it comes to the importance of requirements management. The first one being clarity and precision. Requirements management helps us clearly defining what needs to be built, reducing ambiguities and misunderstandings. Second one is stakeholder alignment, which ensures that all stakeholders have a common understanding of the project goals and the objectives. Scope control helps in managing project scope and preventing scope creep by maintaining a controlled and documented set of requirements. Then quality assurance, which ensures that the final product meets the desired quality standards by validating and verifying requirements throughout the development process. And last but not least, change management, which provides a structured approach to handle changes in requirements and helps us ensuring that all changes are evaluated and documented. To better understand the stages of requirements management, we can take a look into the requirements management lifecycle, or at least one variation of the requirements management lifecycle. This lifecycle can be visualized as a continuous cycle that includes the following stages. Starting with elicitation, we gather requirements from stakeholders using various techniques such as interviews, surveys, and workshops. Once this is completed, we continue with the analysis when we refine and prioritize our requirements, we resolve conflicts and clarify ambiguities. Following this is documentation. This is to create detailed and clear documentation of requirements, including specifications, use cases, and user stories, of course, where these are applicable. Validation verification follows the documentation stage, where validation ensures requirements are accurate and complete through review sessions and prototyping. And verification helps us confirming that the product meets the documented requirements through testing and inspections. It's important and useful to use baselines, and baselines help us to establish an approved set of requirements that serve as foundation for managing changes. Change management will help us handling changes to requirements in a controlled and documented manner, and it will also help us with ensuring traceability. Traceability is necessary to maintain connections between requirements and other project artifacts, and this will help us ensuring alignment with project goals. Monitoring and control is a continuous tracking of the status of requirements, the managing of scope, and reporting on metrics. And last but not least, evaluation is the stage where we review the requirements management process and the outcomes, and this will help us to identify areas for improvement. And then, because it's a cycle, we can restart the life cycle by capturing new requirements, by kicking off another elicitation. In conclusion, effective requirements management is essential for the success of our software development projects. By following a structured life cycle, teams can ensure that they capture, document, and manage requirements efficiently, leading to development of a product that truly meets the stakeholders' needs and expectations. And this process is something that not only helps in delivering a quality product, but also in maintaining control over project scope, time, and budget. So what tools can we use to help us with requirements management? As the title of this webinar says, we are looking into requirements management in Codebeamer. And as such, let's take a look into Codebeamer and what Codebeamer can offer us. PTC's Codebeamer is a holistic application lifecycle management platform. Off the shelf, it provides requirements management, test management capabilities for verification, validation of the previously identified requirements on any of the levels of the V cycle, or in case we are working in an agile environment, then user stories, epics, and tasks. It also comes with risk management and DevOps related capabilities. And as I've mentioned, it supports the full agile stack. Codebeamer is supported by open integrations. These integrations are based on REST and Swagger APIs, as well as OSLC. And these open integrations will help us to plug Codebeamer into our toolchain, whether this toolchain contains a PLM tool such as PTC Windchill, model-based system engineering tools, simulation tools, code analysis tools, or test automation tools. These can be all connected to Codebeamer using one of the integration options. And Codebeamer also, on one hand, is based on industry best practices. So the tool functionality itself is something that takes these best practices into account. And of course, we also have our PTC offers various pre-defined or pre-configured templates that will also help us to get a head start and access industry best practices through these configurations. And we will explore these a little bit more in detail through the key use cases. Key use cases, starting with safety critical systems, where one example is the automotive software development, where the context of the use case is the development of software for vehicles that require adherence to strict safety standards, such as ISO 26262, or where we have to take ASPICE into account on various capability levels. The impact of requirements management is on one hand, compliance. Requirements management helps us to ensure that all safety-related requirements are thoroughly documented, traced, and validated to comply with ISO 26262. and of course, when it's necessary to meet the expectations of ASPICE. The other impact is, of course, ASPICE itself, which is a framework for designing and assessing software development processes in the automotive industry, and it focuses on ensuring high quality and reliable software development practices. The outcome of effective requirements management is, on one hand, enhanced quality. By following the ASPICE guidelines, requirements management processes are optimized to ensure development of high-quality automotive software while reducing cost. Improve safety, of course, is another important aspect where effective requirements management aligned with ISO 26262 expectations or definitions helps us systematically identify and mitigate risks leading to safer automotive products. And last but not least, regulatory compliance, overall regulatory compliance to ensure compliance with ISO 26262 and help us achieving the highest possible capability level in ASPICE, facilitating a smoother certification process, and also it helps us reducing time to market. Our second use case is regulated industries, including compliance frameworks. One good example could be the automotive industry again, or automotive software development. But instead of that, let's take the medical device development and software engineering as an example, where the context is facilitating adherence to regulatory requirements, such as the FDA guidelines, or MDR, IEC 82304, IEC 62304, or even ISO 13485. The impact is, on one hand, again, compliance, where the requirements management helps us ensuring all regulatory requirements are documented, traced, and validated. And this will help us to ensure the compliance with the above-mentioned standards, FDA guidelines, MDR, and or ISO 13485, depending, of course, on the safety classification of our product. Quality management is another aspect where the adherence to quality management standards such as ISO 13485 is facilitated through the comprehensive requirements management, of course, where it's applicable in the quality management system. And the outcome is the compliance itself, the streamlined compliance with the regulations, which help us reducing time to market and, of course, ensures patient safety. And last but not least, the enhanced quality, where improved product quality through rigorous documentation and traceability. And it's also essential for the regulatory approval. Our third use case is complex product development. A very good example is aerospace or aviation engineering, where the context is that these projects might involve numerous intricate requirements and interdependencies affecting multiple teams. And as we've seen earlier, in case of other regulated industries, also in this case, there are various standards in place that product developers have to comply with. For example, DO 178C for software, DO 254 for hardware, and AMC 2152A for airworthiness. These are all critical standards. The impact here is coordination, compliance, and the integration of the product development overall life cycle. Coordination, where requirements management ensures seamless coordination between different teams, managing dependencies and aligning efforts. Compliance applies to the adherence to the above-mentioned standards to ensure that both software and hardware meet the rigorous safety and airworthiness standards. And the product lifecycle integration, where the integration of requirements management with product lifecycle management tool processes, and in both cases, the tool integration ensures a holistic approach to manage product development from conception to deployment. And the outcome here is, on one hand, enhanced project coherence, improved alignment across teams, which helps us reducing errors, ensuring that all specifications or standards are met. Efficient development, which of course can be will have an impact on the overall cost. So if efficient development helps us with streamlined development processes through integrated requirements and PLM, the product lifecycle management, which can lead to efficient and timely project completion. And last but not least, again, we come to the topic of compliance, regulatory compliance, which ensures compliance with the aerospace or aviation-related standards, facilitating the certification and entry into service. Our last use case is agile development, where the example can be a software as a service project. And the context is the agile development itself, where agile projects require iterative development, continuous feedback, and rapid adaptation to changes. The impact is flexibility, because requirements management, in this case, or agile development, has to support dynamic requirement changes, accommodating the iterative nature of agile methodologies. CI/CD, where we need to facilitate continuous integration and continuous delivery practices, and this is supported, or this is ensured by the fact that the requirements are up to date, or the user stories and epics are up to date and accurately reflected in the development cycles. The outcome is improved responsiveness, the enhanced ability to respond to changes quickly, ensuring the product evolves according to the user needs, and of course, delivery in a timely manner to ensure that the software updates are delivered in a timely manner again, and this helps us maintaining a competitive advantage in the market. Now let's take a look into the best practices. There are general best practices, such as clear and concise requirements, which help us to ensure requirements are well-defined, unambiguous, and testable. For this, we need to use a consistent format and language across the project. Requirements traceability, to establish and maintain traceability throughout the life cycle. This is key. This means linking requirements to their corresponding design elements, for example, implementation and integration verification tests. Stakeholder involvement, engage stakeholders early and often. This is one of the best practices, of course. Ensure all requirements are reviewed and approved by the relevant stakeholders. Change management is the next one on the list. It's a best practice to implement a robust change management process to handle requirement changes, assess the impact of changes on cost, schedule, and scope before approval, and of course, before the implementation of the requested changes. Prioritization. It's a good practice or best practice to prioritize requirements based on stakeholder needs, safety, and regulatory compliance. And in this case, you can use different methods. For example, the Moscow module or Moscow model, where the priorities are defined either as must have, should have, could have, or won't have. Verification, validation, where the best practice is to regularly verify and validate requirements against stakeholder needs and regulatory standards, or against this can be applied to all of the levels of the requirements management. And last but not least, documentation, where best practice is to maintain a comprehensive and overall comprehensive and organized documentation for all requirements, decisions, and changes, and to use a centralized repository for easy access and updates. Looking into the key use cases that we've talked about, automotive best practices can be the management of safety requirements, identifying and documenting functional safety requirements as per ISO 26262, and to ensure these are derived from or linked to hazard analysis and risk assessment in HARA elements, either directly or through safety goals. ASIL classification, we need to classify requirements where applicable based on automotive safety integrity levels. Higher ASIL levels in this case require more stringent validation and verification process, of course. Model-based development, we can utilize model-based development for design and verification. Tools, the MBSE tools can help us maintaining consistency between requirements and design. Following ASPICE processes for requirements engineering, including elicitation, analysis, specification, validation, can be also considered to be a best practice. And overall, having a tool in place such as Codebeamer to support traceability, change management, and the compliance with the regulatory standards and ASPICE. Medical devices, where risk management is one of the, well, not necessarily a best practice, but it's depending on the safety classification or software safety classification, it might be actually a requirement based on IC 62304. And the best practice is to integrate this risk management into the requirements management process and to document risk control measures as part of the requirements. Software safety classification itself, again, this is a requirement in the standard, but there are good practices. How can we classify our software according to the safety classes? Because higher classes require more rigorous documentation verification. These lead to a higher cost, so it's definitely a best practice, so to say, to identify the appropriate safety class for the product. Verification plan is also best practice to have in place. Sometimes it's also required, so not necessarily best practice. Develop a software verification plan early in the project, detail how requirements will be verified. Usability engineering, this can be included in the process to ensure the device is safe and effective for the intended users. And last but not least, traceability matrix or traceability in general. It's a best practice to create and maintain a traceability matrix linking the different requirements to risk controls or software requirements to risk controls, design and for design, implementation, and testing. In case of aerospace or aviation-related software development, we need to define the different requirement levels, define high-level requirements, and then decompose them into low-level requirements according to the requirements of DO 178C. And make sure that there is traceability between the different levels, and of course that there are no orphan items across the life cycle. The standard compliance to ensure requirements comply with the objectives of the standard or standards. This includes rigorous requirements, capture, verification, traceability processes. Configuration management is kind of a best practice or a regulation. It depends. This means the implementation of strict configuration management to track requirement changes, ensure consistency across all the project artifacts. Verification evidence means that we need to collect and maintain evidence of verification activities such as reviews, analysis, and tests to demonstrate the compliance. For example, with DO 178C, and peer reviews to conduct these peer reviews of requirements and associated artifacts to ensure correctness and completeness. The last use case on our list was agile development, and good or best practices are of course documented in the Agile Manifesto, or how we should do agile development. But just to mention a few user stories, we can use these to capture requirements in the agile context. We can ensure that they fall into the invest, or they follow the invest process. But where invest means that the user stories are independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. Then the next one on the list is backlog management, where we can maintain, or where we should maintain, a well-organized product backlog. Of course, there are good practices on how to do it. For example, through regular meetings for the Scrum team or Agile team, where the team members are involved, so they understand the priorities. We can prioritize these user stories based on business value and, of course, stakeholder input. Continuous integration, or CI/CD in general, we need to implement a continuous CI/CD process and CI/CD practices to verify requirements iteratively. And for these, of course, there are various tools available on the market. And Codebeamer in this case can be used as a centralized repository where we can store the outcome of these practices or activities. Defining the definition of done to establish a clear definition of done for each requirement or user story help us to ensure that all acceptance criteria are met. And last but not least, on our list, collaboration, communication. We need to foster a close collaboration between development teams and stakeholders. This is especially applicable in case of safe or less. Use tools such as Codebeamer to facilitate real-time communication and feedback. And since I've mentioned Codebeamer, and the whole webinar is about requirements management in Codebeamer, how can Codebeamer in general help us implementing these good practices, or and take advantage of them in case of these use cases? On one hand, Codebeamer can act as a centralized repository for, not only all of the requirements, but of course other type of artifacts as well, test management, test cases, or test management related artifacts, risk management related artifacts, and so on. And this can help us to easily access and update these artifacts. Traceability, from the perspective of traceability, we can leverage Codebeamer's out-of-the-box capabilities to build a traceability project lifecycle and predefine it to make sure that the users, requirements engineers, test engineers are following these the steps on both sides of the V. And at the end of the day, this will help us to ensure and maintain end-to-end traceability from requirements design to design, implementation, and testing. In general, Codebeamer can be used to manage our compliance-related challenges. We can utilize Codebeamer's various functions and features to ensure adherence to the various standards, such as ISO 26262, ASPICE, which is again not considered to be a standard, rather a process assessment model, IEC 62304 in case of medical device development, and of course there are various other standards in the medical in this industry that can be implemented in Codebeamer in terms of processes. And of course, DO 178C is an example from the aerospace and defense industry or aviation industry. And last thing on our list is collaboration tools or collaboration within this centralized repository, where we can make use of the collaboration tool or collaborative tools provided by Codebeamer to enhance communication among team members and stakeholders. So this covers the presentation part of the webinar. And now let's switch to Codebeamer and start our live demo. I've mentioned various use cases and best practices. What we can see on the screen, this is Codebeamer's project browser. If you are not familiar with Codebeamer yet, Codebeamer is a 100% browser-based tool, which means that you do not have to install anything on your computer. You can simply access Codebeamer through the company-specific URL. And after logging in, we will find ourselves in the well, by default on the My Start page, but we can always switch to the project browser, where the project browser lists all of the projects that we have access to. That's another key part of Codebeamer because of the permission management model or approach of Codebeamer. We only have access to what we need to have access to. Of course, these permissions can be granted or access can be granted at any point in time if necessary, but we won't see what we shouldn't see in the tool. This instance that I'm using is PTC's trial environment. On this instance, there are thousands of projects, trial projects created by different users, but I only have access to those that I'm a member of. The projects are created out of templates. Codebeamer has a project-based template-focused approach, which means that the development projects that we are actually working on are all created out of template projects. Template projects can be the automotive, medical, or DO 178C avionics-related template available or made available and developed by PTC, or the Agile Scrum template, which is available out of the box in Codebeamer, or you can develop your own company-specific template to cover, on one hand, your own needs and to implement your own processes. Now, let's take a look into the general best practices when it comes to Codebeamer. Opening up one of the projects, we will find ourselves in the context of the project. As you can see on the top, we got access to various modules that are all project related. But the backbone of our project is going to be the trackers menu, where on the left-hand side, we see the project-related trackers. Tracker is a logical container for work items of the same type, with the same workflow, with the same permission and field configuration. You can consider these as smart documents or smart folders. And each one of these entries is a tracker. This tracker is used to manage user requirements. Another one is used to manage software, system and product requirements, and so on. On the left-hand side of the V and on the right-hand side of the V, we have the various test cases or the different types of validation and verification tests managed in test case trackers. And there are trackers dedicated to the supporting processes, such as change management, bug and defect management, risk management, task management, and there are a few other processes, including release management. Of course, an important aspect is the traceability. And the traceability is something that we can define as administrators, and we can visualize these as users on the configuration diagram. Starting on the right-hand side, for example, we have user requirements, which we can break down into product requirements and system requirements. Codebeamer's visualization doesn't necessarily follow the standard V model, but we can verify the connections, how these different trackers are connected to each other. Let's see if we take these out, then we will see that how user requirements, system requirements are connected to each other. But for example, we can also see that change management is applied to all of these artifact types, and selecting the various or the different levels of test cases, verification and validation tests, we can take a look into how these are traceable to the different types of requirements. Then once we have this understanding on how the different levels of requirements are connected to each other, which is quite important to understand that is fully configurable based on your own needs, and we will take a look into other use cases as well today. Then we can start working on our requirements management, or managing our requirements, either by submitting requirements manually or importing them from various sources such as Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, RecIF documents, if you have any in place, or if you are using RecIF to communicate with your suppliers or customers. And we can also connect Codebeamer to various external tools out of the box, such as Jira and IBM Doors, to import our requirements. In case of Jira, we can also have a bi-directional data exchange between the two tools. Using the predefined or pre-configured attributes that we have configured, for example, for our user requirements, we can prioritize the requirements that we have identified, for example, using the Moscow model or Kano model. In this particular case, we actually use the Moscow model or at the entries or the values to define priorities using the Moscow model. Either we can edit these items and maintain them in the view that we call the document view, or we can take a look into the requirements using the table view, which is more an Excel-like view where we can use double-click action to edit the items. In this case, for example, the priorities, and using the different visualization or visualization aids, we can create groups to identify which items are in the could have, should have, must have group, and we can also order these items based on their priorities, but of course based on any other attribute that we have in Codebeamer. From a collaboration standpoint, we can have discussions on the work items in form of comments. So we can internally discuss the different requirements, what are the potential blockers or gaps, and of course we can create formal. This is more informal, even though this is fully documented. But we also have the ability to create a completely formal review. For example, for our system requirements, we can create a review in the review hub before approving these items. We can define our reviewers, moderators, and viewers. The difference between roles is that reviewers can only vote on the outcome of the review. Moderators can all vote, and they also administer the review itself. And viewers have only read access to the review. They can't vote on the items, nor they can administer the review itself. We can set up notifications, but probably the most important thing here is that we can capture electronic signatures. The signature is a Codebeamer username and password. Basically, it's an authentication that is required by Codebeamer for us to complete the review. Then to set up the review, basically that's all what we need to do. And within the review hub, we will be able to collaboratively review the artifacts, in this case, the system requirements. It's a very similar view that we've seen in the document view. On the left-hand side, we see the structure of the requirements that we've sent into the review. In the middle, we can review the references, as well as the description, the summary. And on the right-hand side, we can review the attributes, which might contain priorities, types, subtypes, complexities, definition of done, acceptance criteria, and so on. Also, we have the ability to discuss the requirements with our fellow reviewers. And once we came to a conclusion, then we can either reject an item. In this case, commenting is mandatory, and it's forced by Codebeamer, so it can capture the reason for rejection. And of course, we can accept these items either one by one or all of them at the same time. And once we are done with our review, if all of the reviewers are done with done reviewing the items, and we are also the moderators, we can set the status for these requirements. and we can define that all approved items will move to an accepted state. Rejected items stay in draft, and where we have mixed reviews, or we can actually send these to rejected, and mixed items, either we do not change or we just mark these as back to draft. Mixed means that there was no clear consensus on whether the item is approved or rejected, and we capture different different votes from different reviewers. Of course, we can keep the review open until all of the requirements are approved and updated and approved, and we can also restart our review later. Now, going back to our system requirements, we'll see that now instead of having 20 draft items, we have 20 accepted items. This is a result of the review hub status setting. What is important to mention that in Codebeamer, all changes are subject of versioning. So in the history of the item, we can see what has changed and how did we get into the accepted state. And under the comments, we can actually see a comment made by the user who finished the review and said the status is that this was a result of the formal review that we have performed. Of course, getting to an approved state is one thing, but we also have to have a process in place to make sure that changes are captured in a control, or changes are made in a controlled manner. So for this purpose, our workflow can be configured in a way that with the help of so-called guard conditions, we can ensure that change requests are in place for those items that we approve. This means that based on the configuration diagram that we've seen earlier, following the traceability connections, we can submit a change request. Change requested. User authentication, for example, details of change. And with that, we have a traceable change request submitted. Of course, on its own, it doesn't mean that now we can reopen the item. First, we're gonna have to approve this change. The change request itself also has a life cycle, and we can configure this life cycle. In this case, I will just use the default life cycle and approve our item. As part of our workflow automation, we can set the change or configure our change request workflow to automatically reopen the requirement or requirements in scope for the change request. But that's completely optional, of course, and we can now reopen our previously approved and accepted system requirement because there is a change request in place, which allows us now to follow the or execute the state transition accepted to draft. We can now perform the necessary changes before the item has been reopened. We were not able to change the attributes. As you can see, for example, summary and description of the accepted item are not editable. And once we are done editing our item, we can continue with the life cycle of the item or multiple requirements in this case, and execute a new review. Of course, submitting these items for example, change requests or product requirements or test cases in a traceable manner is one thing, but we also need to be able to report on this traceability. And this traceability is something where we can take advantage of the built-in traceability browser. The traceability reports can be built manually. So this is completely up to us. What do we want to include and what traceability lifecycle, what traceability connections do we want to report on? But these reports, of course, can be saved. For example, as preparation for this webinar, I have created a traceability report, which basically covers the left-hand side of the V, starting with user requirements to system requirements to product or software requirements. This traceability matrix or traceability report can be used for identifying, on one hand, the potential impacts of a change. Also, it can be used, but there are other ways to do that, of course, in Codebeamer on the item level, for example. We can also use it to identify not covered items. We can also do that with the help of reports. And of course, it can be exported into Excel or Word reports. And we can attach these to the documentation that we need to share with the customer, stakeholders, or the regulatory bodies. You can notice one thing that is important in Codebeamer: the suspected links. The suspected link suspected links help us with impact or change handling. So this is basically a notification that tells us that our user requirement has been updated since the initial traceability from the system to user requirement level has been established. On one hand, we can take a look into the difference and take over changes or value updates from the user requirement to the system requirement level or upstream to downstream level in general. But we can also just simply take a look into the change set itself. And you can see here that the changes affect the complexity and priority attributes. Priority has been changed to must have from high, and complexity has been set from unset to standard. So this can be kind of a tool for quote unquote reactive change handling. Looking into the more specific use cases, starting with automotive development, PTC offers an ISO 26262 ASPICE template that on one hand covers the ASPICE related artifacts on system engineering level, software engineering level, hardware, and in this case, because it has been updated based on ASPICE 4, it also includes machine learning. But of course, it also includes the functional safety aspect. And if you remember the presentation part, we talked about how we can or how we should identify hazard analysis and risk assessment related, or how we should link those artifacts to requirements. And that's something that we can visualize here. So hazard analysis and risk assessment related to those, we can submit safety goals, functional safety requirements, functional safety concepts, and then those can be traced to system architecture, and with those including system requirements, we can break these down into or decompose them into software requirements and architectural design. So this is how we can kind of implement on one hand, it's a requirement, on the other hand, it can be used as a best practice from Codebeamer perspective. Then looking into the medical template, we also talked about the medical IC 62304 related challenges. These are addressed through the software engineering template, also provided by PTC. And in this case, taking a look into the configuration diagram, we can see how the left-hand side of the V is implemented, starting with user requirements, decomposed into system-level artifacts, requirements, and architecture, continuing on the software level. And here you can see how risk analysis is plugged into the requirements management workflow. In this case, on the system requirement level, because we are talking about a software system, and how these are then decomposed through risk controls. Anytime we select a tracker to be added to the configuration diagram, the diagram is recalculated. So that's why I have to scroll a little bit. So you can see now that the system requirements are, or risk items are linked to system requirements. Related to those, we can identify risk controls, and risk controls can be then implemented on product risk, system product risk level, and software product risk requirement level. And a more simple example is our Agile Scrum template, which you can see here, where user stories, epics user stories, tasks, and bugs can be managed. We can, of course, document for these the necessary or the estimated effort needed in form of story points. And then these can be planned or maintained in a release manager, where the release manager helps us to plan the upcoming releases and sprints on one hand, and on the other hand, we can, of course, groom our product backlog, and we can build the sprint or release backlog for our upcoming sprints and releases. And of course, this is supported through team management or the concept of teams in Codebeamer, but that applies, as well as the effort estimation that applies to the standard requirements management as well. So this this actually is the last point of on our agenda. Now let's go back to our presentation, and let's take a look into our questions. Does AMC 21528 represented in a Codebeamer template? If so, is this a template Nanga implemented? According to my knowledge, it isn't at the moment. IEC, DO178C and DO254 are implemented in the aviation template. But of course, we can, as Nanga systems, we can definitely take a look into the AMC 20-152A related requirements. And in case it's necessary, we can extend the template, because that's one of the benefits of Codebeamer, that these templates are not written, or none of the project configurations are actually written in stone. We can extend those anytime, even when the project is live and active, and we are actively working on a product development. Okay, let's see another question here. So what would be the recommendation for the different key use cases to build something from scratch or use a template. My recommendation would be regarding this to take a look into the templates and in case you feel that they give you the advantage and the head start, then definitely use one of them. As I've mentioned regarding the aviation template, the templates, the automotive template, the software engineering template for medical devices, the aviation template can be always extended. Are the review comments written in the review hub visible in actual requirement in document view? Unfortunately, at the moment, no. But that is something that's on the Codebeamer development roadmap. If you are interested in the roadmap, please feel free to contact us via one of these options. Most likely email is the best, and we can get back to you with a more detailed answer in which Codebeamer version is it expected to be implemented. Currently, the best practices from a review perspective is that the authors are also added to the review, at least as a viewer, and they can actually see the progress of the review here on the right-hand side. And then they can open up the review itself. In case there is a rejection, they can open up the review. They can take a look into the review comment, and then they can implement those changes on the requirement level. So unfortunately, at the moment, that's the kind of best practice. Which version control mechanism are available for managing changes for requirements in Codebeamer? So there are various options to do that. So on one hand, we can rely on the out-of-the-box available change control mechanism or version control mechanism that is in Codebeamer. That applies to the individual items. That's important to mention. But in case we need another version control mechanism, we usually create a kind of a management or support tracker where we implement the customer requested version control workflow, and those are excuse me. So those are then linked through traceability to the version that we are about to release. So basically, there is an additional tracker where the workflow of the version control is maintained, and then the version control item itself traces to the requirements themselves, and we use this typically together with baselines or the baseline functionality, of Codebeamer, where the baseline is a read-only snapshot of the project, for example, at the time of the release of a new version. Can specific versions of requirements be added to a release? That's a great question. I would say that in general, no, because, well, how should I say that? So previous versions of a requirements cannot be added to a new release. I think that's a fair statement, because as the requirements evolve, they will have a linear versioning, and the previous versions cannot be edited. So you cannot edit basically because the requirement itself is linked to a release, what you can see here. So if I have a version now that I assign to version number 2 of the battery management system release, version 2, then the next iteration of the requirement can be assigned to a new release. This version that we are looking at, version 8 that you can see here, this cannot be really assigned. But as a best practice, we can use how we call this phased development, or well, we can use working sets. The working sets will allow us to, let's say, keep the state of the project, let's say release 2.0, BMS release 2.0. We can include our requirements, or we can have them as part of the working set itself. So what will happen in this case is that we create a parallel stream. In the example, we were working with the default working set, which is the main branch, if you will. And we can branch out into a working set, which will allow us to have 2 parallel life cycles for the requirements that we have identified on the main branch, while the other branch evolves into a different direction. And with this previous versions, so of requirements, can be added to releases. So this will allow us to basically keep the previous version by keeping the previous version in one working set, and new versions are developed in another working set. We can assign and build our release by picking the necessary elements, the elements that are necessary for our new release from different working sets. For example, we have the working set ready for the BMS release 2.0. And what happens now if we can change our user requirements here. Let's say MFA. Okay. Okay, there is a rule in place that doesn't allow me to assign myself. Basically, what happens here is that if we change something on an item where the assigned to value is not yet mandatory, let's say we change the priority, then this will show us how the parallel life cycles can be managed. Let's say we identify a new requirement then. And this is part of the BMS release 2.0, but the release that we are working on in the default working set, BMS 1.0, the new requirement is not there, as you can see. So that's how we can kind of address the use case that you have on hand. And that way we can assign a specific requirement version to a new release. But in this case, the different final requirement versions or approved versions are actually stored in separate working sets. All right, so that's the last of the questions. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for your questions and attention. And I wish you a good rest of your day and see you in our next webinar. Thank you.